Hello, this is Greg Allison from Green Greg's Garden and Worm Farm, coming to you on the 16th of February, 2020. And I've got a special guest with us today, an interesting individual, an expert in many things. He's at Harvard, Dr. Paul Cottrell. Dr. Paul has been looking at the genome of COVID-19, among other things. And he's had some very interesting findings looking at this genome. So Dr. Paul has come up with some rather stark conclusions, and he's very much aware of the things going on around this virus. So we definitely want to hear what he's got to say to us, and I want to welcome Dr. Paul Cottrell to our channel.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So first off, I want to start with a question. Can I just call you Paul? Is that good enough?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you, Paul. You came to a conclusion based on your analysis of the COVID-19 genome that you saw entire blocks of DNA from other similar strains of this virus that seemed to be inserted in total near the ends and near the middle, which is not typical of say, gene mixing you might normally see where you have multiple viruses in a cell that are somehow exchanging DNA. And you've also seemed to have discovered something related to the HIV virus. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, okay. So this is based on my coursework that I did at Harvard. We have to go through genomics and other courses that go into the NIH database. So at the NIH database, you can do something called BLAST, and you can search the database and have a certain organism or a certain genome, or even a proteome, and see which organisms are similar. So when they released the Wuhan strand from China, it was put into the NIH database. And so I was just, curious. All I had was a curiosity, and I went into the NIH database and ran a blast search. And what came up was homologies, meaning that there are nucleotide similarities to other organisms. They were all coronavirus organisms that were tied to something called the bat-like SARS coronavirus, the SARS coronavirus. And what was unique about the Wuhan strand at that time that I did the blast was that there was about a 2,000 nucleotide insert at the replicase end of the genome. The replicase is what helps make the proteins and the RNA for this particular virus. This is a RNA virus. And a few days later, there was a paper that...
your mitochondria and a lot of your organelles, basically.
Right. So at the other end of the genome, codes for the S protein, or what other people call the spike protein. So in the S protein, there's about 600 or so nucleotide insertion. And you do not get these mega insertions without some sort of manipulation, like CRISPR or some recombination techniques in molecular biology. So if you take a look at the organisms at that time that were matching with high homology, you started noticing that it was bat SARS, a piece of bat SARS, bat-like SARS coronavirus, inserted in the replicase area, and the SARS coronavirus inserted in the spike protein. A few days later, there was a paper that was released by Cold Spring Harbor. They have an open source database. And there were a bunch of Indian researchers that ran the HIV virus genome and found that there are 4 insertions at the spike protein part of the Wuhan virus that have some homology. Those 4 inserts, 3 of those inserts are from the glycoprotein 120 of HIV. The glycoprotein 120 is cleaved from a larger protein that's a glycoprotein 160. So they took those, they took that genome and they inserted it into 3 areas, just upstream of the insertion point from the coronavirus, SARS coronavirus insertion, the 500, just
So
upstream.
all these insertions are like adjacent to each other. They're just not random.
Well, the very first one, that's the replicase, that is around the 2000. We're talking about a genome that's about 30,000 nucleotides. Okay, so the replicase insertions were around the 2000 mark to 4000 mark. And the spike protein insertions were around the 21,000 mark. And the HIV homology insertions was just before that, before the 21,000. So the insertions, the HIV insertions were from the GP120 part of the genome of the HIV and the GAG part of the genome of HIV. Now, the GAG part of the genome helps with assembly of the capsid of the actual virus, the HIV virus. The GP120 helps with attaching onto cells. It's the actual the attachment. So what they did is they bioengineered Wuhan, whereby they took pieces of bat-like SARS virus, pieces of SARS coronavirus, and 4 insertions that were specifically targeted to be put on the spike protein. Now, from a clinical point of view, and we can prove this, and they have papers that go all the way back to about 2010 that Dr. Ping Zhao, who actually was the researcher with his team that made this virus. Now, this
and a thumbnail for one of my videos. I've got a picture of him.
So he was key to this, and he's associated with the P4 facility lab.
Right.
So we have a virus, the Wuhan virus, or COVID-19 now. They keep on changing the names. So COVID-19 is a bioengineered virus. Now, you can use bioengineered viruses as weapons. I don't believe that the virus initially, because of the research papers that we can track all the way back to 2010, maybe 2007, of them manipulating this virus to some degree to understand the reasons why bats are the natural host. Right, exactly. So they wanted to know, why does it stay latent? Why can it live with that host? So they can study it in the lab and come up with, pharmaceuticals or vaccines against a supercharged version to speed up the research and all that. So now, with proof, we have genomic proof and a trail of papers that have been released for years that show that they were manipulating this virus, this zoonotic virus, into a bioengineered virus. Now the question is, what happened at the P4 facility? Was it leaked on purpose, or was it leaked by accident? Now, I am at the point at this moment in time, because this is, we're at the front lines of trying to understand what's going on. So there is a fog of war, and people need to understand that. We're not writing history. We're trying to understand in real time what's going on, and people later will look at our channels and be able to write the history. But the bottom line is we're trying to exist. Right. Well, yeah. So we might all be just worms, but
I saw worms,
So I'm at the point right now that, because there was a history of leakage from the P4 facility dealing with SARS, that there are protocols. There are poor safety protocols in place at the P4 Wuhan facility. I'm about 65% with an accidental release. I'm a 35% where it was on purpose.
Okay.
Now, of that 35%, I know I'm trying to unpack a lot. But,
absolutely.
But I'm trying to get everyone up to speed with the current the current hypotheses that we have and the theories that we have. Okay, we develop a hypothesis, we try to test it, we get some information, and then we develop a theory. If it's not working, then we redo it. So at this moment in time, I believe that it was an accidental leak. But there is something that, because you got to look at this problem, not just the scientific pillar, which we just talked about, but we have to also look at the geopolitical pillar. The CCP is trying to project, and we have to step back from the virus at the moment. The CCP has published multiple times that the PLA, that their military, it wants to control
the People's Liberation Army, for the listeners that aren't aware.
Right. They have already broadcasted that they want the first island chains to be controlled in 2025. And we've had our Navy academies, game theorying and war gaming this. All right. By 2045, they want to control all the island chains. So what they're trying to do is do creep. They're trying to do scope creep along the Pacific and prevent the hegemonic power of the US Navy. I believe that either through an accidental release or a purposeful release, that the CIA or some other type of covert group that we don't even have a name for is leveraging this to try to throw the CCP. And that Miles Go, or Guo, I think it's pronounced, that is tied to Steve Bannon's show, War Room, Pandemic. He shows up all the time. He's a billionaire guy. He's a little eccentric, and but the reason why I think that there's a CIA operation going on, where there's the 35% chance that maybe this was purposely leaked, was on January 4th, on Twitter. He has a channel on Twitter that basically, or account on Twitter, called Voice of Guo, Guo. And on January 4th, he tweeted a cryptic message. And that message read something, I'm paraphrasing, but that message read something about 10 seconds and 1 minute. And it kind of has a factor of 6, or a ratio of 1 to 6. But then shortly after that, he says China will live on June 4th, 2020. When you take June, which is 6, you take the 4, which is the day, and the year 2020, you take the month, you divide it by 2, you get 3. You take the 4, you divide it by 2, you get 2. You take 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 0, which is the year, that's 4. You take 4 divided by 2, that is a launch code for forward operations for CIA, because it's 322. And I believe that the CIA was that an outside group was waiting for a launch to pull down the CCP, and Guo and Steve Bannon is kind of the psyop to convince the American public that the CCP should be overthrown. Honestly, I think the CCP should be overthrown.
I agree.
Right? But yeah, they should.
By the people inside China,
right. But there is a strange thing going on with Bannon and this Miles Guo. But that's, I don't have enough data points. Now on my website, I do have a database that people can go to under the media tag. They can go to data files, and I have something called coronavirus operations, and I'm working with a external researcher that's trying to tie the dots between Bannon and
links to that, and I'll put it on this video.
Okay, so I have about 16 files showing the connection between Guo and Steve Bannon and him funding his operation. All right, so there's financial ties, and then there was this really strange cryptic message that seems to be coding for Skull and Bones. And everyone knows that Skull and Bones is what started the CIA. That's well-known fact. That's not conspiracy theory. That's a well-known fact. So I believe that there are forward operations going on to pull down the CCP. And another data point to kind of prove my thoughts here is people know about the Five Eyes. The Five Eyes is the UK, the United States, New Zealand, Australia. It's kind of like a surveillance, geopolitical surveillance grid. All right. It's really odd that Hong Kong, which I believe in protecting. You know, the United States should protect Hong Kong and Taiwan. But it's really odd that they were able to get American flags really easily. That screams CIA operations, right? During their protests. Right. So we're involved in that area to make sure that they aren't able to do the 2025 agenda. On top of that, President Xi had released in 2008 a policy called the 1,000 Talent Plan. And it was to recruit 1,000 talents around the world to try to pull technology from all different disciplines and have it transferred over to China. We just saw recently Harvard professors, Professor Lieber, that was arrested, and graduate students that were caught stealing biological and nanotechnologies. And then we also have heard in mid of last year, individuals tied to coronavirus laboratories in Canada stealing material. So we see that this plan, this 1,000 talent plan, is an operation. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's fact, and it's already been published in mainstream. So I believe that we're trying to prevent them from instituting both of these policies, the island chain policy and the talent policy. And I'm for these operations. I'm not against them. I'm for, you know, pulling down the CCP. But if that 50% chance of a 35% chance that it was purposely leaked out, so the question is, who leaked it? I think 50% chance that maybe the CCP, someone against President Xi within the CCP, is trying to pull him down. That's really scary unless they had an antidote. The other 50%, now this is a hypothesis here, right? I don't have proof, but the other 50% is that it's possible the CIA did it with insiders at the P4 facility, and that most likely they realized that because the way this virus works, it attacks individuals that have upregulated ACE2 receptors. And those individuals are primarily people that smoke or have, you know, respiratory problems, that are males. Males have
because they smoke more.
You know, so they smoke.
But here it may be females more.
Well, you know, the data is showing that ACE2 receptors, if you have cohorts that are not smoking, all right, you remove those, you have males that upregulate ACE2 more than females. Now, if you add in a smoker, then they'll upregulate ACE2. So it really depends on the cohorts that you're going.
To males, then.
Yes, and Asian males, but we need more data on the Asian male connection. There's not enough samples that's been released to prove that hypothesis, but there's tons of evidence saying that this is targeting males, and that it will target individuals that have compromised pulmonary problems.
So let's move more from the cause of the virus to the how it can affect people before we jump in. And what I'm understanding is that, and I don't want to jump straight into this, but there's a lead in from this ACE2 inhibitor discussion, the ACE2 receptor. I understand that it is more prevalent in lung tissue, heart tissue, in your small intestine, that you have a lot more of this. And I also have the understanding that there is a prospect, a strong chance for a secondary infection of this virus causing a cytokine storm that could well cause heart attacks, major disruption of your organs, essentially death. Before we jump in, I do want to mention something though. So that's where I want to go with this. But I do want to mention to my subscribers and people watching this, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please do subscribe. I'm going to try to stay on top of this and many other topics, because it's the proposition of this channel to enable the subscribers to survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. I cover a broad range of topics to keep you aware so that you can prepare, just so you won't be afraid, you won't be scared, you'll be prepared. My motto is keep your eyes wide open and the head on a swivel. And that's why we're bringing you word like this, news like this, so you know what's coming. But I also cover how to grow your own food, why you should grow your own food, why you should prep in a time like this. We may be coming up on a major quarantine right here in the United States. And it's gotten very, shall we say, unattractive in China of late. I don't know how much we'll be able to get into that in this show, but the things that I'm hearing from over there are extremely disturbing, my friends, extremely disturbing. And you better take this serious and prepare and get started right now. And it's not time to think about it, it's time to run. So I do have links below for those that want to buy prepper supplies like long-term food storage. You may not be going to the grocery store, and if you go there, the shelves may be bare. Trucks may not be bringing stuff in and out. There's only a 3-day supply at the grocery stores. So My Patriot Supply, I keep links below my channel. They have great long storage food supplies that can last to 25 years, especially the canned freeze-dried items. And somebody, like if you buy a year supply, that stuff's like $2 a meal. You don't know how long this is going. Some people are suggesting this may be a 2-year event like the Spanish flu. If you do nothing but get 2 months of supplies or a month of supply, anything can help you. Also, go buy dry beans. Don't just go there. Go to the Sam's Club, the Costco, where you can get 25-pound, 50-pound bags of dried beans and things that's going to last you. You know what? Their peanut butter will last a while. You can get dried peanut butter at My Patriot Supply, by the way, which will last 25 years. But there's plenty of things that can get you through this. Also, you need to be able to grow your own food, because you may not want to be out and about, but you may want something green. If you've got some pots and containers, you can grow a container garden in. If you've got a backyard plot, you want heirloom seeds. If you don't have anything, you can grow indoors. I have videos on growing microgreens in my living room. And you can actually make a living doing that if you so choose. But you're going to need good, nutritious food, because you got to keep your immune system up. Microgreens have up to 40 times more nutritional value than a regular full-grown vegetable. So it's a very attractive thing to have when you can't get out of the house and get out and about, or you're afraid to. If the quarantine is not one put upon us, you may want to self-quarantine with the stuff coming up, especially when we're about to get into the things that we're about to discuss. And also, by the way, instead of throwing all your kitchen waste out and letting them accumulate on you during a time that the garbage trucks might not be running, this is an excellent time to start with some worms. Buy some worms from me, and you can recycle your kitchen waste, your yard clippings and paper, and turn it into good stuff, put in those containers and pots to grow your own food or put in your garden. Links are all below. So now let's get back into this. I do all these things because I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about the times we're in. Why does a guy go from aerospace where, I had a nice desk job and, a nice, cushy, comfortable world to getting out here and busting in the woods and working? Well, actually, that's rewarding. I feel more reward sometimes when I shovel my flatbed 1-ton truck with a load of horse manure than I do sitting around working on requirements documents for avionics safety on a booster.
Right. I mean, you're making a good point. You're making a good point, just to interject here, that we have lost through modern living, the experience of working with nature. And the human spirit, the evolution of the human body was in a natural environment, what we call nature. We did not evolve with all this computer technology and all that. This is a very relatively new thing, and we're already seeing the detriment of an overabundance of technology and modern living and being attached from society. Just like if someone goes to, let's say, camping just for 1 week and they totally detach and they don't have their cell phone or anything, you feel better. You absolutely feel better. Yeah. So, through these nature baths, you start to realize, and then once you get back into the city and you're bombarded with 5G and, and all these, radio frequencies and stuff, it's affecting your body. It's affecting your sympathetic and so it's our modern living is overactivated our sympathetic nervous system and has created too much cortisol. And I think that is a major point, a data point on why we have sickness. And the other is the GMOs and and all this other stuff.
Yeah. By the way, I grow turmeric. That's one of the things I grow, and what would be blistering the cell here, and that fights inflammation very strongly, as you may be aware.
Yeah. No, I take turmeric, regularly every day as an anti-inflammatory.
Amen. It's very, very good for that. So, here's what I'm worried about. Here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that word's starting to come out of China of people getting reinfected by this virus and it being more deadly on the second go around, and being more deadly apparently because your body starts trying to develop an immunity to it and overcompensates and creates a cytokine storm of immunological response that kills the person who is getting the second infection.
Right.
What do you know about that?
Okay, so we need to kind of backtrack a little bit and inform individuals. What does ACE2 receptor do? It does a lot of things, but it helps with controlling blood pressure through the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone pathway. So what happens is that when you start to have lower blood pressure, you need to absorb more water and salt, and that's through this pathway. And there are a series, I'm not going to get all into the biochemistry of it, but there is, within this process, there is a conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2 through this receptor, angiotensin 2 receptor. When it is compromised, you are not able to make the aldosterone to raise the blood volume to control the blood pressure. And this is part of the reason why people were fainting in China. Okay. Now you also got to remember that this virus is supercharged. All right. It's supercharged at the replicase side of the genome, and it's supercharged on the spike protein side, the S protein.
Which helps it grab the
ACE2
pulled into the cell.
Right. The spike protein. Right.
Spikes and gets pulled in.
Right. But there's also some there's some thought that needs to be proven that it's also affecting the CD4 plus cells and downregulating the antigen T cells, the T cells. So when someone is infected,
HIV inserts,
possibly, and that's where we're concerned. So it's definitely affecting the ACE2, but we need to investigate more and really look out how is it affecting these individuals that are getting sick in China have been reported to have lower white blood cell counts. So people need to understand what's in the white blood cells. Well, a lot of it is T cells. Some of it's B cells. All right, your B cells is what makes the antibodies, and they're helper cells and the manufacturing cells and all this. But for T cells, there are cytotoxic T cells that kind of seek and destroy a cell. There are antigen presenting T cells, which I think is what's being affected by this virus. And then there's what is called suppressor T cells. The suppressor T cells is kind of like, how do you regulate B cell production and T cell production? If you're overproducing antigen presenting T cells and B cells, you'll have autoimmune diseases like lupus. So what this disease seems to be doing is not just affecting the AT2 air sac cells that have this upregulation of ACE2 receptor. It also is affecting a lower white blood cell count in some mechanism. We think, my team thinks, it's through the PD-1 pathway, but it's downregulating the antigen presenting T cells and it's keeping a certain concentration of the suppressor T cells, so the body can't produce the antibodies and present antigens to allow for the antibodies to be produced. So it stays dormant within the individual. The virus stays in the body longer. See, and that's the reason why they bioengineered this, is to go under the radar of the bat with its immune system. So back to this idea of the second wave.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different ways to look at it. All right.
Some people, third wave here with a whole nother effect from the HIV components and immune system. So
and a lot
box.
Right, and a lot of people in the United States have compromised immune system already. So if your battery isn't fully charged and you're hit with Wuhan, you have less chance of a positive outcome. Yeah. So that's why recharging your battery, your immune system to the highest it can is really important, and catching it early. and catching it early. But to get back to your point about the cytokine storm, and how it's affecting heart patients, this angiotensin, this renin-angiotensin-aldosterone pathway is compromised, and it's kind of like a sepsis. When you get a severe infection, it's affecting other organs. It's affecting the kidney. So there's reports, because of China, there are reports of kidney dysfunction, heart problems, or the lowered white blood cell count, and problems with the liver. Now, liver is associated with this pathway that I'm talking about, this aldosterone pathway. Okay, it's a little bit more upstream to the conversion of angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. But you got to kind of see this endocrine pathway that's going on here. But when you get hit by a second wave, okay, you can look at it a few different ways. You're sick, and you're hit with a mutated version in the population with it. That's a second wave to you. You are healed. You have antibodies. And it mutates in the population, and that population doesn't have those antibodies, because a lot of times, we got to remember, a lot of times when viruses jump in evolution, either through bioengineering or through zoonotic, or in nature, right, they attenuate eventually in the population over time. Okay,
went away one day.
Right. Yeah. But these waves could either be in some cohorts in the population, depending on their antigen presenting capabilities and what they produced, and how healthy their immune system is. They may actually get an attenuated response, while others would get the cytokine storm. So it's not, you got to remember, this is not a one size fits all thing. People that get Wuhan is not necessarily going to have, the severe pulmonary problems. It may actually present itself as mild. And that gives people a false sense of security. There are others that could die from this. So there's a very large spectrum. So it's like, will there be a second wave that will be attenuated within the population? Yes. Will there be a second wave that actually is stronger than the first wave, causing all these other immunological storms and problems and sepsis and other considerations? Absolutely. Because the worse that this gets with a particular patient, it will affect your blood pressure.
Okay.
Because of this ACE2.
All right. So let's go to another point here. So in the past, there have been attempts to produce coronavirus vaccines.
Right.
I tried to do a search on those just before our call, and all I came up with was zillions of articles saying, within the last few days, talking about new attempts that they're going to develop a vaccine. I mean, just from countries all over the world, there's a lot of groups out there rushing to develop vaccines for this right now. But what I have heard is that historically, there were a few attempts to develop a vaccine for coronaviruses that were tested in animals, and they thought things were looking good because they saw the antibodies in these animals. But when they infected those animals with the coronavirus, they died. They died massively, often having heart attacks and other major organ shutdowns. They died massive, quick deaths due to cytokine storms because their immune system overreacted. And maybe I heard it wrong, but it sounded like a majority of these animals died. Now that may be overinflated case. What have you heard about that? Have you heard?
No, you're right. There is a research paper out there that's talking about this particular situation where they inoculated animals. I believe they were mice. I think it was mice. But you got to understand that a mouse model isn't 100% to a human model, and it could help or it can hurt. Like for example, like in cancer research, which is some stuff that I've been doing at Harvard. A mouse cancer model, you can give a mouse cancer with just 2 pathways that are knocked out. For a human, you need, in most cancers, not all, but in most cancers, you need 5 pathways knocked out. So you can give, so if you give a drug to a mouse that kind of cures a certain type of cancer, it doesn't necessarily translate to the human body. So people need to understand that it's not a one-to-one. It's the best thing that we can do, though. You know, it's
okay. So the reason I'm asking.
But the point that the point that you're making, it's true that once they get the antibodies in from the vaccine,
Right.
and they are presented with that virus, there is an immunological storm that takes place, and it actually speeds up the inflammation and the destruction of the pulmonary system, and people are concerned about it. Now, I believe that in that research paper, they were dealing with the new platform of vaccines. People don't realize that there are many different types of vaccines. There's attenuated vaccines with chickens, chicken eggs.
Mm-hmm.
There's inactivated vaccines. There's a subunit or conjugated vaccines. There's a whole bunch. So there's this new platform called messenger RNA, which the NIH is kind of promoting, the messenger RNA vaccines. And there's two types. One is just a straight messenger RNA, which is put into your bloodstream or, just under your, in your muscle area, and that will induce some sort of immunological response. Then there's another where they actually conjugate the messenger RNA with a protein. So you can take RNA and connect it with a protein, all right? And that protein is the spike protein. So it gets it into the cell, all right, to have more efficacy to get that messenger RNA in to the cell.
Okay.
And then there's two things that might happen with the messenger RNA. One is the messenger RNA can be coded and make proteins. So you can design it where it's making proteins within the cytoplasm of these cells, and those proteins are inhibitors to certain proteins that are absolutely needed for the cell to be manufactured. So you can block them, like protease inhibitors or whatever. There's other
kill a cancer cell.
Right. So there's that's one method. Another is that the messenger RNA could be used as a antisense to the RNA of the virus to lock. If it's the opposite strand, it's the opposite code, it'll lock into place, and it will recruit enzymes that'll eat up that RNA and break it down into its just base nucleotides. That's another method. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. There's not enough transparency by the government and by the vaccine makers. What is in the messenger RNA? Because you could have a Trojan horse come in through a messenger RNA platform. It's harder to have. You could have the Trojan horses in all the vaccines, but when you say messenger RNA, you're sending code into your cell, all right? And if you have a transcriptase at the inside this RNA, you can have this insert into your genome, because that's how HIV works. That's how retroviruses work.
Right.
Now the coronavirus is not a retrovirus, but you could make in the vaccine program a messenger RNA that codes in such a way that inserts code into your genome. And that scares me. That the transparency. So what we really need is a third party that we trust that can randomly select lots from these vaccines, from this new platform, and prove the sequencing of the messenger RNA and the quality of the vaccines before they're put into the human population. Okay.
Okay. Let's be active then. How do we push to get that done and get it done right? Because a lot of people are just flat out scared of vaccines because they don't trust the sources they're coming from, because they don't trust Mr. William Mann, whose last name sounds like a bunch of bars on a door.
Right.
And they don't trust the WHO, the CDC. They don't trust these authorities, especially after hearing about And these could have been done for legitimate purposes, but things like Event 21, excuse me, 201, and like the food chain, what do they call it? Food chain reaction game that was a program ran by Soros, executed by oh shoot, what was his name? The guy who was the chief of staff for Hillary when she was running. I'm getting brain lock right now. Podesta, John Podesta.
Podesta, yeah.
Yeah, he ran that exercise, and they basically that exercise had the premise of what would happen to food supply if a pandemic hit in the year 2020. And the year 2020 was the year they selected, coincidentally. And both that and the Event 201 came up with very similar conclusions on a lot of fronts, and has a lot of people highly suspicious. Whatever it is, it has a lot of people highly suspicious. And so a lot of people are not going to want to take a vaccine. There's going to be talk about mandatory vaccines. And so we've got the potential for a staged conflict in the United States just over that alone. Right. So if we could find a good way that we could have a true, absolutely trusted third party that could vet the process, that could be worthwhile. How do we establish that? How do we push that? How do we convince the powers that be?
Well, I've been an advocate of everyone that's listening to my channel to call their representative at the state level and at the federal level to promote our biological civil liberties, and that we need to have transparency. If we don't have transparency, then we're not going to trust the government. I'm not, I'm not, independent if someone's pro-vax or anti-vax. I think both sides can agree that there needs to be more transparency. And, I've been vaccinated for certain things, but I won't take other vaccinations. But unfortunately, because of my research, I have to get certain vaccinations. So when you're in the medical field, you're basically force-vaxxed, because if you're not, you can't do the research. So
travel internationally. Hey, I was in the military. I was a pincushion back in those days.
yeah. And it's like when my brother served in the Army, and when he was enlisted, and they pumped them all up with a bunch of vaccines, he was deathly sick for 2 weeks. So here's the problem. It's not just the quality of the vaccines, because there's lots of preservatives that are harmful to individuals, certain types of individuals. And there is, I think, a quality control problem. There's no incentive, really. You can't sue the companies that are making it. Bingo. So there's no, yeah. So, we need to roll that back where you can sue them. Bingo. We have to have tort law to make sure that, that the quality is, there's a quality assurance, but it needs to be verified by a third party that the public trusts.
Okay, I got an idea for you. How about this? How about we tackle this the same way I'm tackling power grid defense, me and some of my friends and associates. You might notice if you go back a couple of videos on my channel, I did an interview with Command Sergeant Mike Mabey. He's got a website where he, if you look at it, he's pushing various initiatives. He's taking various actions. He's actually filed a complaint recently against the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to try to get our grid. He says the standard for hardening the grid is not adequate. Mm-hmm. He's also filed Freedom of Information Acts previously to force more transparency in the power industry for a lot of the failures they have, that they're being swept under the rug. So I think maybe a campaign like that would be useful to this community. So you might look at his website, which is linked on, if you look back, I've got two videos. One of them was just a live session I did trying to point everybody to the other one, because I accidentally posted it right after midnight when I was trying to edit it. I was doing this number. Mm-hmm. I live on about 4 hours sleep a night, and sometimes it gets the better side of me. So, the best time to post something is like 5 o'clock in the afternoon, typically like on a Thursday. And that was what I was hoping to do with that video. But so I did a live session after that to pump that video. So you'll see two different videos of me, not me, with Uncle Sam in it with power grid towers behind him. Go to the older one of those two. That's the interview with him. And both of them have the links, incidentally. So you might want to look at those links. But in essence, I think we should have a concentrated campaign in this country. And we can use this brotherhood, sisterhood of YouTube channels that we orbit in with the LEAK project and Oppenheimer test project, test project, excuse me. You know, Oppenheimer reminds me of other things that went boom.
Right, right.
So, so that's something I think we could do and use as a way to get this ball rolling, an initiative. And we may have to organize a little bit. There is a Secure the Grid coalition that has a weekly telecom with groups around the country, which I participate in, and so does Mike Maybe and a lot of other people. Maybe we need some kind of effort like that to push for this transparency in the vaccinations, to push for third-party organization that can look and see how these things are developed. And somebody like you would be the perfect person for developing the wording and for coming up for what's needed to make that active. I've got a history of political action. I ran the halls of Congress. I have literally took teams of 100 people on numerous times, used to have an annual spring blitz, and I have directly influenced congressional policy. It can be done. A lot of people don't realize how much power individuals can have when they organize the things we can actually accomplish. So I know these things can be done because I've done them. It's happened. It's worked. I might not look like a rocket scientist right now, but trust me, I've been around and done a few things in my life. And I know these things can work. And right now, the elected officials still, in some degree, have to answer to people when there's enough people bringing attention to something. If there's just onesie twosie people, they'll sweep it under the rug and go with what the corporations want. You know, I did a video about that. I talked about in that video how governments are really run, about the unholy alliance between the regulator and the regulatee, and how Congress is in bed with that. And that's part of our problem here with the big pharma industry too. It's a huge problem there.
We have to elevate the conversation at a vocational level and also at a philosophical level. All right, and at the philosophical level is that there is an erosion of self-reliance purposely.
Bingo. Well, that's intentional,
right?
too, my friend. They're
Right. They want you to be part of the Borg.
Bingo.
Right?
Exactly. That's why I've got 3 parts to my motto: survive, thrive, and stay out of the hive. That's not being to the Borg.
Right. So, you know, from the philosophical side, we need to understand that it's been pushed onto the American public about hyper-globalization. There's nothing wrong with trade, global trade. I'm not anti-global trade, but I am against uber, globalization, because uber globalization means the reduction of nationhood. It means reducing the civil liberties of that nation, and you're beholden to a larger organization that can dictate you to you what is. So, and you could see what was happening in Brussels with the UK, and they wised up and they said, no more. So, and I think that Trump is trying to go to what I call localization versus globalization. You know, all the MBA programs we're talking about, shareholder maximization, but they don't realize that they created a systemic risk by doing that. And that systemic risk is the inability, because of all these just-in-time supply chains all over the world, that we become more fragile.
Okay.
Right. And there's not enough overlap, a buffer to take exogenous shocks. It's a major problem.
I don't know if you've ever heard of a story called iPencil. It's about a story written in the 1950s about what it takes to produce a number 2 pencil. It was mind-boggling in the 1950s. Imagine today. I did a video on that, and I called it, I think something to do with the fragility of our society. If you go back and look through all my videos, I covered that as a topic, because our society is amazingly fragile. And going with increased uber globalization makes it ever so more fragile to any number of catastrophes that could entirely wipe out our civilization. It's not.
There are two writers, Niall Ferguson, Dr. Ferguson. He's a historian, economist, historian type. He wrote a book called the Tower and the Square, and he's talking about basically the fragility of the tower, the ivory tower, which is the top-down government, and the square, meaning the people.
Right.
and the networks that can be created at the grassroots level, and how powerful the square is versus the tower. And then Dr. Taleb, wrote the famous book about the Black Swan, but he also wrote a book a few years later called Anti-Fragile, and he was talking about more about the financial markets. But the idea is that we need to develop systems that are anti-fragile. But unfortunately, the global playbook has made things more fragile.
And that's their solution. Their solutions are like the Agenda 21 and their global, their Agenda 2030. Supposedly it's to help the environment. The best thing you can do for the environment is to buy local. The best thing you can do for resilience in society is to have local produced production. But they want to sweep that away. They want to take everybody off the farms and put them in the city and rack and stack ISO shipping container homes. And I have nothing against shipping container homes, even rack and stack, but to be forced into them and to be forced into urbanization, to take people away from their means of production. I mean, they're basically trying to centralize all production. That's why I guess Bezos has, bought Whole Foods and is also buying out a lot of these production means. And then they take Del Monte Foods and label them non-GMO when we know better. And then he's coming up with a distribution system, direct at-home delivery, just like his Amazon goods. So they're trying to put the small growers like me out of business. It's not going to happen, but that's what they like to do unless they can force it to happen, and they might do that. They try every way they can through regulatory systems to put small independent people out of business. This is what happens to your small independent tradesmen who go around and wire your homes and do the plumbing for you. The old guy who knows when a component breaks, how to take that solenoid valve apart and replace the piston or whatever is in there, or down to the nuts and bolts level. And instead, now you get a bunch of young kids coming from these big companies that are certified, because he's now got to file 21 different certifications and spend umpty thousands of dollars and hours getting certified every year. But a big corporation, that's just a thin veneer on the top of their overhead. And so they send in these kids that don't know jack diddle about anything and replace your entire system for thousands of dollars. So you lose. And quite often, you think you're safer. No, those kids don't know how to wire a house. You're more likely to get burnt down than that old guy out there who used to do it for you. So what they're doing is they're killing the small companies. They're killing the small operators. They're doing this across the board in every industry. With it being Walmart shutting down all the five and dimes and local stores downtown. And that's what's happening. In some ways, you get a lot of goods cheaper, but then in the end, you start getting the crap. And go to Walmart today, what do you get at that place? It's junk. And it all comes straight from China, and it funds the PLA.
Exactly. And unfortunately, we've been building up China for the last 20 years.
And now and maybe they are too.
And it's time. It's time for American citizens to wake up, and they need to wake up in a lot of different dimensions, in terms of their health, in terms of localization versus globalization, being part more of your community instead of your just little household. We're put into these like little silos, and we assume that when there's problems that arise, that the government is the answer. But back in the olden days, the government wasn't the answer. It was the local community helping each other.
Right.
So it's we the people in our Constitution. It's the strength of the people. When we're together, we have power. But when they've divided us, in terms of left or right, Republican or Democrat, this or that, we aren't together. Yeah, and exactly. They're conquering us. Now, if we tune out that and come back together and heal, it's we the people again. And we can tell the government, because they are beholden to us. They only have power when we're divided.
Amen. And that's why these political actions work. That's why they can still work. We just have to take advantage of it while we still can.
Right.
I mean,
Here's
they're trying to take away our liberties, our freedom of speech, our social platforms, our right to defend ourselves. They're trying to take all that from us. And historically, when that's happened, the result has always been horrible tyrannies.
Here's the problem, and they know what they're doing. The eye above in the sky, right? They know what they're doing. What it is, you divide people and you put them in a fear situation where their cortisol levels are really high, and they want it to go away. They're in sympathetic state.
COVID-19.
Yep. And, they just want an answer, and the government gives it to them. And they erode their civil liberties. Like right after 9/11, everyone was fearful of terrorism. So they were able to roll in the Patriot Act saying, we'll give you safety, but you have to erode some of that civil liberty. Erode, the protections of improper search and seizure and never-ending surveillance state.
Ben Franklin anticipated that, and his statement about it was he will give up freedom for security deserves neither nor will have either, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
Right, exactly.
But you can't have either one.
You got to
give up.
I phrase it a little differently now in just a modern vernacular, but you got to live with fear and be free than to live in safety but under tyranny.
I choose freedom.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the American spirit, because you got to take risks. Being an American is about taking risks and the exploration of the human spirit.
That's it.
That's when you boil it all down, that's what America is.
Well,
So, I've been trying to get people to get more engaged with their, local representatives and tell them how they feel about what's the transparency with this particular crisis. What is the plan, their local municipality plan for an outbreak? What should they be doing? And they're concerned about the biological civil liberties that could be eroded by the HHS and the CDC, especially when it comes to forced vaccinations. Because with forced vaccinations, there's going to be an awful lot of people in fear, and that fear is multiplied by a government that's not being transparent.
That's the problem.
So we need a government that's transparent, and we need the citizenry to band together and reach out to their representatives and say, we do not want what I call the Bio-Patriot Act.
So here, boils down to this: if this stuff is so good, why can't they be transparent about it?
Exactly, because it's not. That's
yeah. If all this stuff is so good, and why is it that every mention of the word coronavirus on YouTube gets a video demonetized? I mean, what's going on? I mean, it's just like there's such a clampdown on information.
I think that the clampdown is for two reasons. One is to quell the worry so it doesn't affect the economy, because I think the banking industry is really tenuous, and that through the repo rates, that if you have just a little bit of a hiccup, you may have a lot of counterparty risk. And this issue with this biological crisis versus a banking crisis could be a Lehman times two, because you got commercial paper. Go ahead.
In system safety, we know that we usually have design features that keep things from going bad. Mm-hmm. And one thing breaking don't usually give you a catastrophe. It's like you got slices of Swiss cheese. Well, it's when all the holes line up that you have a catastrophe. And I see that happening now because our banking system is overexerted. We are in the same situation we were before the 2008 situation, which we never really got fixed. And now I think it's even bigger than it was then. All the buildup in debt and various aspects of the economy are worse today than they probably were then, but we're just ignoring it, chugging along. The food situation is grave because we had very, very late plantings last year. A lot of the harvest didn't come in because we had early frost. This year, it's raining like everything here. It's crazy how much rain we're getting. It's going to be hard for anybody to plant. We're seeing a rerun. It's probably even worse than last year. I'm being flooded here where I'm at, just literally flooded. So I don't know how in the world farmers are going to get their crops in time. And I would expect, based on what I'm seeing, another early season round of frost. So, and yeah, the USDA is still counting all that corn in the field as part of the inventory, thinking they're going to harvest that rotten stuff this spring before they plant, which is something else they got to do before they plant, right? And it takes away from the time. But that stuff is probably so rotten, they ought to just plow it under. If the birds hadn't picked it already, it's full of mold and God knows what else.
So you'll appreciate this analogy with, because I deal with chaos theory. You'll appreciate, when you have a complex system, you can have vibrations or certain things going wrong within a very complex system, but they may seem disparate. but eventually they get into harmony, and then there's a chaotic attraction that takes place, and you have complete system failure. And we are approaching that, and that's what I call the different pillars. There's a financial pillar, there's a socioeconomic pillar, there's a civil liberties pillar, there's this biological pillar. All these pillars are starting to shake with a certain frequency that will lead to a chaotic attraction.
Well,
right? And that's a nonlinear event. Nonlinear events happen.
In a rocket or any structure, you got a harmonic frequency at which the whole system shakes or vibrates. Look at the seal of the Tacoma Bridge and see how a little crosswind took it down. That's what happened. Tesla understood this thing, and that's how he made a little package to put on a tower and hit it with a hammer, a legend, and nearly brought the tower down in New York City before he took it off. So if you keep hitting something, pinging it to resonant frequency, every ping adds, and it keeps adding. It's additive because that's the frequency at which this thing vibrates, and it just builds up. So that's and in a rocket, you can have catastrophic breakup of your vehicle. That's what happened with the Soviet N-1 booster, which was intended to be their competitor against the Saturn V rocket to take Russians to the moon. It blew up on launch twice.
Right.
So
that's the problem with the layman. The layman only looks at one variable. They don't really see this in a system engineering perspective, like we are. And that's why we're trying to call the alarm and say, hey, you guys have to start paying attention here because we're hearing the sound. And it's unfortunately it's hard to get people to get engaged. And we have a lot of passive watchers of this. They're concerned, but they're being passive. They're not getting off the couch and calling their representatives and getting prepped and doing the more active things that they should be doing. And it's hard. It's really hard to get them motivated.
There's a lot of reasons for that. One, they've got the attitude that, well, they will take care of it. Well, there is no they. We are the they. But that's the whole idea of the government, teaching that it's the great Uber parent. It will take care of everything. You don't have to worry about anything. And it does a very terrible job of it, by the way. And we're trying to use this to raise our kids, and it's like raising them by wolves. And so a lot of things are missing in today's society because of this surrender everything to the government and sit on the couch and munch bonbons mentality. We've got to get engaged, or there won't be no bonbons. There won't be no TV to watch. There won't be a power grid. You're going to starve to death, and you're not going to know what to do to yourself. So it's going to be a very bad situation if we don't get.
Have you ever seen WALL-E, the movie, the animation by Pixar? This came out like a long time ago, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah,
it's called WALL-E.
Part of it. I've seen part of it.
Yeah. So I mean, but basically, they pollute the planet, and then they have to go out into space for 50 years, and the robots that are left are cleaning the planet, and then they'll ping the spaceship to come back. Well, the people that are living on the spaceship, they don't even walk anymore. They have these human carriers, and all they're doing is drinking and eating and consuming entertainment. That's it. That's their life. And in a lot of ways, it's emblematic of what's going on in the United States. And
that's where they want us to go.
And people need to just get off the couch and get into nature, and they'll start being human again.
Get off the couch and do something. That's something I've told people in the past.
Right.
Just do something.
Exactly.
That's what's cool about getting out here and working outdoors. I'm getting things done. I do things, and you feel a sense of reward for it. I mean, a lot of people, that's hard. Why do I want to do that? When you finish something like that, when you've done something, you got a sense of pride, a sense of accomplishment. It's worthwhile, even if it's moving a pile of horse crap. Really and truly, you've done something of value, and you can see it, you can measure it, you can look at it. There it is. But I'm out working in the trees, and if you hear my videos, you'll hear peeper frogs, maybe squirrels. Of course, my neighbor's dog quite often too. But and I got a few other freedom-loving neighbors. Sometimes you'll hear machine gun fire.
Right. But that's just the human spirit, exercising the human spirit. But unfortunately, in these mega cities, I live in New York City, so I mean it's the mega city, and the people that live in the city are not human. They're not human beings. They just they're just
Ants.
just existing. They're just existing. I view it as almost like the city is the organism, and the humans are actually a red blood cell just flowing through the streets.
Right.
And eventually red blood cells get filtered out and die, and new ones, are generated. And the humans are just the red blood cells to the city. Unfortunately, it's a New York and places like it are very, very cold when it comes to the human experience.
Well, that's a sad thing. And, I talk about the Hive in a couple of my videos, and I really worry about that. And what happens is, I think the overall society, the system, wants to make us all automaton. I can't even say it right now. Robots, just worker bees, worker ants. They want to take out all of our sense of personality and individuality and turn us into little cookie cutter beings that just serve their function. Automatons is what I was trying to say. But it's literally worker ants. But you don't even have a soul. How do you have a soul when you're existing like that? That's a horrible way to exist. When you think, yeah, sure, you're maybe safe and secure, but what kind of life is that? And you're only safe and secure if you serve their purpose and their pleasure. In the end, if you're not serving their purpose and pleasure, and you live in a tyranny where you have no freedoms of expression, no way to address things that are happening to you, no way to communicate to other people, you can just disappear. You're basically a useless eater, as Henry Kissinger would call you. And so
you've heard these municipality rules that are starting to creep up in the United States, where you can't even grow a garden in your suburb, or can't work on a car. So we grew up as kids working on stuff, all right, or had a garage band, or did stuff in the yard. Today, they are trying to curtail that to the point where you have to go and buy it from the corporation. You can't even make your own music anymore because you don't have a garage to even practice.
All the songs are now written by two guys. There's two guys that write all the songs that's consuming the world. It all sounds like elevator music, and all the speakers sound the same. It's junk.
Right. It's very formulaic now, and the society is moving in a very formulaic way, and that's a data point of this AI that's starting to roll out. Everything's going to be efficiency, market maximization, and the human species. You need stochastic. You need that randomness. Nature is random. Nature doesn't plant trees in a very straight line, right? I mean, there is a stochastic beauty to nature. That's the same thing about the human spirit. There's a stochastic beauty to it, and unfortunately, the powers that be and the algorithm makers for the AI think it's all about maximization and pure game theory, but that's not the human spirit. The human spirit is trial and error, learning from mistakes, and there's a stochastic process that goes along with that.
Right. Some people think that they can upload themselves to a computer. Most of the computers that we have today are run at the very heart of the computer.
Well, what happens if you get the blue screen of death?
Well, let me tell you something. Yeah, exactly. It's more fundamental than that. The very heart of the modern digital computer. Now, I will give an exception. We come up with neural networks. This could change, but they're still very primitive. But the very heart of the computer is something called arithmetic logic unit. And I learned how to design those. So arithmetic logic unit is only capable of doing one task, adding high and low voltages. It's just basically accumulating and collating tasks. It's really not what we would call adding, but it has the same mathematical function. Now, to get a subtraction, you just create a negative add. And you add them in such a way that you would get what you'd have done if you had subtracted. But it's still an adding, even though it's really a correlation process of high and low voltages, which we call ones and zeros for our convenience and mathematical expression. That's what we call them. Well, when you add several times, that's multiplication. When you subtract several times, that's division. Well, from these additions and divisions, we can write algorithms and codes that do crazy, stupendous things, to include, movies. This video has been streamed digitally, what we're producing here. The computers that we're running on run algorithms, and you know, these various AI systems in our phone, Bixby and Siri and all these things, you know, they sound so smart and intelligent, but that's because they have sophisticated algorithms. But at the very heart of it is an arithmetic logic. And how are you going to find a soul? How are you going to seat your soul in a machine which very core is just an arithmetic logic in it? I think the people that think they're an algorithm are sadly lost. I do believe we have a soul, but that's a matter, and I have my reasons for that. So
I'm not a proponent of transhumanism at all. I mean, I'm totally against transhumanism. You know, I think I call it, there's, as transhuman, part of our population is going to plug into transhumanism. All right. There's going to be a part of the population that doesn't. And so I call them I call that the monkism. All right. Monkism is that you're not afraid of technology, but you realize that there's a distance. So almost, in a way, almost, but it's not perfect. But the analogy between, let's say, today's technology and Quakers, we will be like the Quaker. The monkisms will be like the Quakers and more connected to nature, but use technology though. That's why I say it's not the one-to-one, but the transhumanists will become more and more and more dependent of the computer. So when they do that, if the anti-fragility theory is true, which I think it is, the transhumanists will be at risk.
Oh yeah, definitely.
While we are more grounded to literally grounded to the earth, you know, where it's less fragile.
Well, what I'm trying to do too is to spur the development of tribes, of people, of communities, of groups that can prepare, because the lone prepper and survivor has very slim chances of surviving. And what's the point of surviving if you're all by yourself? We're social animals. So I think it's important to try to form communities. That's something I started on my channel. I think maybe a couple other groups are out there doing that too. So what I would like to see is us evolve communities that after it hits the fan, we can shake it off and stand up tall again and reemerge and restart things, hopefully better on the other side of whatever it hits the fan might be, should that occur. But in the meantime, I hope that we can be proactive enough to either stop it from hitting the fan or at least mitigate the way in which it hits the fan, so we can have a better chance of shaking it off on the other side. And that's where things like our career defense activities, where what you're doing matters. I also do prayer meditation sessions on my channel. I started that a few months ago, having just a regular session for people just to stop and meditate, to pray. And when it comes to overcoming fear, I think that's very important. If you're afraid, your immune system's already compromised. You're going to have trouble dealing with the things that are coming at us. You're going to have trouble just wrapping your mind about it. Cognitive dissonance and just a shock at what's coming. You can't respond to things coming at you if you're just in shock. And a guy sitting on the couch who's munching bonbons, he's going to be in utter shock because he's not invested any mental time into thinking what could come or how can I deal with it. He's the guy that says they are going to take care of it, but they ain't going to be there when it happens, because we are the they. And so I have a proactive choice about that. And that's what I'm trying to lead, is people be proactive. Now, sometimes people see one or two of my videos and they'll take what I'm saying out of context. It's a tapestry. You got to fit it all in to understand where I'm really coming from. So I did a video recently, some of the listeners, I was talking to the kids. I was talking about wayward adults come home. They thought I was talking to the whole generation. No, the video was wayward adults. I was really talking to those that are lost, the young kids today who are on drugs or don't have a path in their life way. They don't know where to go. And I've also did videos on tough love, where I blame the parents for letting things get where they're at, our nation's disintegration. Because guys like me, when I'm trying to hire people to do work out here, it's hard to find people. It's really hard. So trust me.
I think just to dovetail and add to what you were saying, I also think it's important, and maybe it's a romantic thought, but I don't think so. The concept of protecting the Constitution and the uniqueness of the American spirit, you know, instead of having it, you know, become an apocalyptic thing.
I believe in bearing arms.
Yeah, exactly. You know, but the thing, you know, protecting the Constitution and the civil liberties of all of its citizenry is very, very important. That's a big piece of this, of what you're saying.
Amen.
And that's what I'm trying to promote is that get to the point where it's we the people, where we're raising the voice and telling the government that we're concerned and that we need to work together to solve the problems that
Amen.
that are coming to us.
And if we get ahead of it, we can do all that peacefully and successfully and come out a lot stronger on the other side. And that's why we need to get proactive and do things like having people contact their congressman, as you suggested, as we've been suggesting through our power grid defense activities and such and so forth. And as I have done in the past with regards to space policy. I was head of the policy committee, the National Space Society, as executive vice president for 10 years. Well, I spent 2 years as the chairman of the executive committee, which is the CEO of the National Space, all on the side. It's just stuff I did out of my own pocket because I care about the future. Now, let me ask you a question. You're in New York City, as you pointed out. You're at probably one of the worst places you could possibly be in a major outbreak. You're in one of the worst places you can be when it hits the fan. You're in a food desert. My friend, you're a national asset. You need to get out of there. What are you going to do?
Well, let me tell you a story. All right. When I was born and raised in Michigan. All right. And I was an automotive engineer, yeah. So I traveled a lot. I lived in Europe. I lived in Germany. I lived in Japan, and I lived in South Korea. And when 9/11 happened, I was actually in South Korea working on an automotive project. And I saw my country fall apart while I was distant. I saw it from outside in. Most of my citizens saw it from inside.
Right.
So when I flew back to Detroit on September 16th, I saw all these American flags waving and trucks and going down the highway and everything.
Made you feel good.
And well, it did. But the thing is that it was the beginning of a mega surveillance, and it was the rollout of this Patriot Act.
Amen.
And people were in fear, and they were very patriotic, and everyone, wanted to go into and fight the bad guys. And we fought the bad guys and we killed the bad guys. But the thing is that all of the surveillance to get the bad guys is still there. And the point I'm making is that we need to roll back to a pre-9/11 surveillance state.
Amen.
And prevent this Bio-Patriot Act from rolling out because of this crisis. But to answer your question about why New York, as time went on, I had more of an affinity to try. I live in Lower Manhattan, and I wanted to be a part. I live right by, very, very close to the Freedom Tower. So, and it's in, very, very easy walking distance. And I wanted to see, and I wanted to be a part of the renaissance of rebuilding Ground Zero. Because most people can't say that they lived it. I have been and saw literally the first piece of steel going into the ground for the Freedom Tower, and I have seen it rise up like the Phoenix. So I see this as being a part of something that's much larger than myself, and that is the rebirth of our nation by contributing, by living right by Ground Zero and saying, I am not afraid.
It's
and
interesting.
That's why I'm in New York.
My last interviewee was at the World Trade Center when it was hit. Command Sergeant Maybe. He actually grabbed a crippled guy and brought him out of the building he was in before it collapsed. And in his heroic fashion, he credits the crippled guy with saving his life because he had this feeling he needed to get that guy out of the building. That's why he's still alive. So, that's his typical style. He's a great individual. So it seems like we have a lot of 9/11 connections with my recent interviews here.
To kind of give a little bit of a piece of advice to listeners. Yes, it's important to prep. Yes, it's important to be more local. Yes, it's better to be on a piece of land and farm it and be closer to nature. But there is also a part of the community that still can stand up and be proud of the nation and to contribute even in a larger city like New York. But New York needs to reinvent itself. It can, but it needs to reinvent itself where it is less reliant and more self-sufficient. There's a lot of potential. There's a lot of potential there, and people like you have some ideas on how to do that. With stacked greeneries and solar paneling and different types of materials. New York could be actually a test hub of sustainability and localization.
Absolutely. And I visited a family in Pasadena, California, who on 1/10 of an acre grew all the food they for 3 adults. It was 4 that their father died, and they make a living selling off that plot. They grow 6,000 to 7,000 pounds of food per year on 1/10 of an acre, just using old-fashioned raised bed gardens with some trellising. So, and you can do so much on all these rooftops, within the towers themselves, off the sides of them. And the beauty of this is you could re-green New York and create more of a nature bath experience inside the city itself. And it would be psychologically so much better for the inhabitants of the city if you do that. And that's something I definitely would like to promote, is that kind of activity. More work from home. Now, here's where we use technology. I'm not anti-technology. I do believe we should maximize work from home opportunities where possible, so you don't have to have all the commuting and don't need as much of the infrastructure and office space. And all that office space could be converted back into growing facilities and areas. You could also go more from manufacturing to additive manufacturing and other techniques like that that people could do from local shops or within their own homes, and reduce further the need for distribution systems, manufacturing facilities way over in China. And if you're worried about CO2 in the environment, we talk about attacking our use of it here in the United States. There's nothing that puts out more nasty CO2 than those big cargo ships that are going back and forth across. They literally buy a raw product here in the United States. They ship it around halfway around the world to China. They make a little plastic widget with it and ship it back.
See, here's the problem with the community that's afraid of CO2.
I'm not afraid of CO2 plant.
No, I'm not either. But the
if
ones
you
that
are afraid of it, you're taking the wrong approach.
The ones that are afraid of this, the climate change individuals, they're not focusing on the real danger, and that is nuclear power. The problem is that it is not a clean energy. It lasts for 10,000 years, the waste. And when there is a catastrophic event like Fukushima or Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island, you're forever in danger. So it's something that needs to be shut off and dismantled. Now, that is, and most of the infrastructure is past its prime. It's past the 50-year mark. So
let me lay one on you here. You can inject boron in the reactors and stop the neutron reaction in the reactors itself. But the real problem at the nuclear power plants is outside the reactor containment building. Well, that is a problem. That containment building could be compromised in a major catastrophe. But there is more nuclear fuel and spent fuel rods, and also fuel rods waiting to go into the plant, in the cooling pools that sit outside the main containment building. These are in a building that just has a sheet metal roof over it at best. And they're under 20 foot of water, but they evaporate like 160 gallons of water a minute. It takes constant pumping to keep the water on top of them. And the reason they need water on top of them is because they have a zirconium cladding on them, a zircaloy alloy that will burn on contact with air. Now, the native zircaloy won't do that, but this stuff has been enriched with hydrogen. And when it's hot, which it is, and makes contact with air, you have the heat, the fuel, the spark, it burns. It burns on contact with air. I had somebody who worked in a nuclear plant trying to argue with me it did, but I've got the test results where you can clearly see that this stuff has burned, and it burned even more than they thought it would, even without having the hydrogen enrichment. So it was crazy what they found about these things burning. So these fuel rods, when the power goes out, you've got so many days supply of backup fuel to run the backup generators. You might be able to get another load or two to them, but eventually the whole transportation system is going to unravel because you can't get spare parts. The supply chain is gone. These trucks will not roll without a lot of maintenance, and all those parts are going to be gone. You won't be able to put tires and cells in them eventually even. The fuel the pump to run the trucks at the fuel pumps, the gas stations requires what? Electric power. The whole supply chain. There's no money. All the money is digital in banks. The money is gone, along with the transhumanists, right?
Right.
All this stuff is gone when the power grid goes down. There's so many ways to bring the power grid down. It's not funny. It's just a whole host of different ways it can fail. And some of them are like clockwork. It's going to happen, be it a solar event or something like that. A coronal mass ejection from the sun. Sooner or later, it will get us and take it out. There are many other things, people and other things that could take action to cause this to happen. But there is enough, just in the spent fuel rods here in the United States, there's more, 380 times more radioactive material there than all the nuclear warheads on Earth.
Yeah. It's an existential problem, and people need to. Most people don't think about that. And I've been paying attention to Fukushima and how they're trying to clean up the disaster. People have fallen asleep. They have cognitive dissonance on the risk is here in the United States.
But we can do.
And we have an aging. We have an aging. They're more worried about the football, and they need to wake up.
All the politics is like a circus these days. Anytime you turn on the major news channel, it's what's the left and the right doing to each other with regards to whoever's in the White House. That's all it's been for the last couple of decades. It's just been a soap opera. It's a political soap opera.
Have you had a chance to see my last 2 released videos on my channel about the CDC?
I had just started to watch the last one. I was just getting into it before we got into it.
Okay, so basically, we have inside information that the CDC is hiding confirmed Wuhan cases
in New York and places
in Buffalo, New York.
Buffalo, New York. I caught part of it.
Yeah, so we have confirmation from health workers in the hospitals there. So, and it's unconfirmed in places like Oklahoma and Texas. So I suspect that we have a lot of nefarious things going on and lack of transparency by the CDC to quote, quell the fear. But for people to be prepared and to wake up, they need to have a transparent government, and that's not happening. And unfortunately, some of these healthcare workers are getting gag orders. And it's easy to gag someone when they're in fear of losing their license, their medical license. Right. So, people need to just stand up and say, what is the plan? And we'll work together, get past this crisis, but we need to be vigilant. Our civil liberties are not eroded, and a forced vaccination program is instituted.
Okay.
Because I believe that that's what's moving. We're moving towards forced vaccinations.
You've been a real leader, like like the guy who wrote Common Sense,
Thomas Paine.
Thomas Paine. You've been a real leader like Thomas Paine here in getting the word out about what's going on with this virus. You're a real leader in the recognition that we need to maintain our liberties, the importance thereof. You're like a Patrick Henry. You're out there telling the world what we need. You're laying the groundwork. But now that we're laying the groundwork and getting the information out there and it's disseminating, the next step is let's build a framework to launch this into action so we get word to the people that have got to get it, so that we can have the right kind of action taken, that we can get people marshaled to go talk to their congressman or whoever else they need to talk to.
Well, I did a poll on my channel, and let me see if I can get the latest data on the poll. Okay, let's see if I can do this in real time here. Okay, I did a poll a few days ago, and that poll was about, did they contact their representative? 507. Now I have a channel of just under 21,000 subscribers and millions of views. But out of 571 people that voted, this was the question: how many actually called their government officials on the BioPatriot Act and outbreak protocols in your community? Only 17% said yes, and that is the problem.
Well, if we reach out to more and more people, that number of how many is in that 17% grows. And if we keep hitting on this, there's an old axiom in marketing, Paul, that people have to hear something 6 times to buy it. They got to see something 6 times to buy it. And that's an old axiom that used to exist. I don't know what marketers would say today, but people have to hear something over and over before they commit themselves to the decision to take action. So we just have to keep driving this point home, and they're doing that. But we need to give them an organizational framework to work within too. And I think that's why I told you go check out what Mike Naby's doing. Him and I've got another friend who runs a Secure the Grid coalition, Tommy Waller. There's a lot of people out there that are doing things like that, to take action, to marshal the word, the things that we did within the National Space Society Policy Committee back when I was chair of the Policy Committee. A lot of the things that we launched, we developed a political action network, things like that. I've gotten some experience with that, so I definitely have wisdom to share in those areas. I've been there and done that. I do have a worm farm to run, a lot of worms to run today, and a lot of work to do. So I can't keep the interview going forever here, although I'd love to. I think we could do several of these. We're on a similar page on so many things. I'm sure there's a lot we can share, especially as news develops, as we try to figure out how to marshal people to take the action needed to make the transparency there for us. It would be good if we had a vaccine that we could truly trust. I'm not anti-vaccine, but I am anti-putting something in my arm and injecting my veins when I don't know what it is.
Right.
You know, give me the transparency and I could be happy with it. The science of the idea of a vaccine is good. But when you don't know what they're putting in you and you can't sue them if it's something bad, and if you don't trust the people who are behind it, there are multiple problems and issues with that. So,
right. And the other thing is that this new platform, because it is a new platform, messenger RNA vaccine, protocol, we don't know the long-term effects of second waves, third waves. And as long as they're upfront with it, and you have the decision to make, well, should I take the chance and take the vax and not knowing what the long-term effects are, or should I wait? But that individual should have that right to make that decision.
Right. Here's what people are going to be afraid of. People are going to be afraid that when they take that vaccine, the first wave is their second wave. When they actually get hit by anything, that they're going to get that cytokine storm and they're going to kick over dead. People are going to be afraid that they're getting a time bomb injected into them.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I said, there's different ways to look at the second wave. The second wave could be, viewed from someone that's been vaxxed with this messenger RNA. A second wave also could be, just within reinfection within the population.
Right.
Independent of vaccinations. So, I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at the second and tertiary waves.
Right, exactly. So I do have someone who's asked me to ask you a question, one of my friends. She's a Native American from the Amazon who's living in Canada now, in British Columbia. And she said they discovered cases. There's a confirmed case about 25 miles from where she's living in British Columbia. But she's noticed that there are no cases that's been reported in Brazil or South America. She's not aware of any cases among Native Americans. And she's wondering if maybe there's some genetic basis that they have a stronger immunity against the coronavirus. Now, I know it's probably early to tell, and maybe there's just not enough reporting from those areas yet. But Chinese are quite confused in many places in the world today because they've been really trying to spread out and reach out with that plan that you're talking about. There's an actual name for that long-term plan that Xi Jinping has cooked up. And I've mentioned on one of my videos, I can't remember off the top of my head, but they're looking at an outward growth and progression of projection of power, starting with the -9 line and through the Pacific Islands, and they're actively working that. Mm-hmm. So they are out there all in the world, including they're in massively into Africa, and they're massively to a lesser degree in South America, Central America. But we don't see any reported cases yet. Don't mean they're not there. It could be like your case in Buffalo, but we're not seeing reported cases in those countries. Is it possible that they have some special immunity? Is there something we can learn from this?
I think it's more that it's social behavior of traveling. I don't think there's a lot of Asians that travel to South America versus the other countries. And I also think it's dealing with weather. We're in the winter now.
Right.
We're in the summer. So
Vitamin D.
Yeah, it's you know, so it has something to do with maybe temperature,
Right.
ultraviolet,
Right.
and migration patterns in terms of traveling. I don't think it's genetic at this moment. I don't think there's any data to state that it's genetic, other than, you know, the ACE2 presentation, you know, with males, you know, being more, and especially Asian males for the receptor upregulation. But I think in the case of Brazil, I think it's more due to climate at this moment in time, and they're probably going to get a hit. And this is the thing people need to realize: this is going to go around the world. As you know, we're in the winter, and we'll start warming up, and our cases will start to go down. And as the other side of the lower hemisphere starts to get colder, they're probably going to start to get cases, and there's going to be this 18-month wave that comes around the world. And when we get into our second winter, that's maybe the time we get that second hit. So people need to be cognizant that everywhere in the world isn't the same temperature, and that the dynamics and the R0 values are different because of that. Right.
And another thing is we're looking at potential multi-year impact from this. Even this director of the CDC, I believe his name's Robert Redfield, if I get it right. But anyway, he made a statement that they were looking at this being a multi-year event, maybe lasting a couple of years, as the Spanish flu did.
And that opens up what I'm concerned about, and that is, well, that means you need to be vaccinated for the coronavirus. By then, in 6 months, they'll have something tested, and then they can start the manufacturing. In 8 months, they'll be able to roll it out in larger masses. And so they'll say, well, we have the new coronavirus, you know, for this season, just like they're doing with the flu. And the death ratio is higher for the coronavirus than influenza. More people get influenza. You know, there's like 50 million people that get influenza, but only 50,000 die. And some of those deaths are complications of other diseases.
Right.
But we have a kill ratio much higher. We have a kill ratio much higher with Wuhan.
Well, if we have HIV implants in this virus, then we could have a higher than normal complication rate from other diseases, because it's made depress the immune system, similar to what
exactly.
It could be much higher, and it could be a long-range disease. This could be a lifelong disease like HIV. I mean,
we need more research. We need more research to understand the molecular biology and the biochemistry and how this virus attacks the CD4 plus cells. Why is the antigen presenting T cells being downregulated? We need to understand that. That is a key data point.
Well, I would hope that you could develop some talking points, some things that people can use as tools, maybe some draft letters that they could take with them, things that you want them to say, and put that on your website. And look at what Mike Mabey's doing. And maybe you and him ought to get in contact with each other. He lives up in, I believe he's in Connecticut, so he's not too far from you location-wise. Like I said, he was there in the World Trade Centers when all that went down. So he's definitely a patriot. He is a guy that's trying to make a positive change for the future. I think you and him would get along fine. But yeah, he's got a model for how he's doing things that you might want to emulate. You might want to follow that, and maybe we could develop some kind of political action network among the followers of the sisterhood of channels that orbit around the Leak Project and the Oppenheimer Ranch Project and things like that. I know, by the way, I've been admiring your 48-star flag behind you. Why the 48-star flag? I've been
no. Well, I mean, it was just pulled off the internet. I mean, it's, you know, but you know, just to, you know, for a background, but you know, just to show patriotism. But the bottom line is that we are a country with great states, all 50 states, with great people that can contribute to the nation. And you know, I just want to have a peaceful world. I don't want
That's what
I don't
everybody.
want mass destruction and the loss of civil liberties. But the thing is that we also have to, not only will we communicate with doing recordings, but we'll communicate behind the scenes and try to get more organized.
Bingo.
All right. But the thing is that it's important to try to do this peacefully, banding together and telling our representatives that this needs to end. No more civil liberty erosion and the rollback to a pre-9/11 day.
There is still a legislative process that we can avail ourselves to, and at this moment in time, it can still work. So we need to use it while we can. If we can roll back that Patriot Act, then we have achieved a major victory for long-term liberty.
Yeah. But the thing is that there's a small chance that they don't listen and we don't get organized. And if that happens, it's our right and obligation to step up to the plate and defend the Constitution.
Amen.
People need to realize that I don't want it to go kinetic, but we have to wake up and take the words of Thomas Jefferson very seriously, that the tree of liberty is watered by the blood of patriots.
That's right.
And this is, we do it peacefully, but if we don't get it, it goes kinetic.
And Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death."
Right. Exactly.
If you don't have liberty, it's as good as death, or maybe worse. You're a prisoner in a system. You're a worker bee, a slave. That's what you will be. And people don't understand that. They think that they're going to be able to sit on that couch, watch buns, and get a check just for a living. The living wage or whatever they want to call it. That's not going to work.
Right.
But anyway, so Paul, it's been a great video. I really appreciate everything you're doing. You are a patriot, and I'm glad to see a young guy like you with the energy that you have and the fire that you have in your heart and soul to do something good, to do something positive. You are a leader. You're a star and a great representative for your generation. So I'm very much encouraged to see you doing what you do, and you're going to paint the future of liberty and what this country can be. So I salute you, sir, for all that you are and all that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate it. But it truly takes we the people to make this country great.
Amen. Amen. And that includes the listeners. You listeners in this audience, we're doing this for you. We're doing this, one, so that you can be aware of what's coming, so that you can prepare for it yourselves, your family, your communities, that you can form tribes as necessary so you can have groups that you can survive among. But we would like you to take the next step to try to keep this from being one of the things that we have to deal with, to go to your congressman. And Dr. Paul Cottrell has things on his website that you can use now. We've talked about things we'll form down the road. You don't have to wait on that. You can take action right now. He mentioned this survey he's got. So he's already out there trying to get people to do something. So don't wait. Do it now. Take action. Do it now. And go back and look at my videos with Command Sergeant Major Mike Mabee. We're trying to get you to take action to secure the grid. Do it. Do it now. I'm trying to lure young people to come back and getting off drugs and becoming a part of society again. I'm not trying to belittle them at all. I'm trying to encourage them to come back. That was what the intent of all that was. It wasn't to every young person I was talking to those that are lost right now, who don't know where to go in life. There's plenty of young people that know exactly where to go in life, what they're doing. That includes my 3 children. Look at Dr. Paul Cottrell here. He's a young man, and he's made amazing accomplishments, and he's got the fire in his soul to ensure that we have a great, prosperous, free country. And that's exactly what we need. And you can follow those examples. You can be part of that, part of ensuring this is a better country for freedom, liberty, and prosperity. And if it hits the fan anyway, and it comes, let's position ourselves as best we can to shake it off when it's over and stand tall on the other side and make it a better world.
Right.
That's what we're all about. And stay on for a minute, Paul, after I end the recorded session. I'd like to chat just a minute.
Okay.
So to all of you that watch, this has been a long video. I hope you get a lot out of it because we certainly covered a lot of ground in this video. And I expect there's going to be many more with Paul to come, with Command Sergeant Major Mike Maybe, several other people in the power grid defense community, several other people. I think we're going to be forming a network over here. I'm still working the tribe thing. I've got a group in Arizona who are to be as yet named, probably will remain unnamed for purposes of a survival tribe is not something you want public. But hopefully we'll have a lot of these across the country. And do everything you can to keep yourself safe and free. Make sure that you learn to grow your own food, that you prep. We may be in this for 2 years, my friends. You may be needing to grow food on your place to take care of yourself for at least 2 years. You may need 2 years of food supplies. Watch my videos. I tell you so much about this stuff, how to grow your own, how to prepare. And buy my Patriot supplies below. Do you want to have all your waste accumulating when the garbage man's not running? Turn it into good soil to grow your food in. Buy worms. Anyway, everyone, you're great. You're wonderful. I love my subscribers. I get some of the best comments in the world. Some of you don't quite understand me, and so you pick on me a little bit. That's fair. But then watch all my videos, my friends. Watch them all. They all fit together in the context. And it's not just me. It's we have a whole community of people here that are trying to take forward a message of how to be self-sufficient and to live free in liberty. So stay alive, thrive, and out of the hive, my friends. And thank you all for watching. I'm going to end the recording session here. So, my friends, thank you.